thank you so much for joining and listening. I have another real special guest I'm really excited about. This is Chris McGill, of course. I think a lot of people know him as House of Jordans in the hobby. Chris, of course, I consider one of the OGs in terms of content creation regarding this hobby with his House of Jordans podcast that he started up, I believe, around 2018. And that sort of led him to being one of the most well-known people in the hobby, and now, of course, he is transitioned to being a co-founder, CEO, and head of research for CardLadder. So, first of all, let's just say, Chris, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this.
My pleasure, and I'm excited to be on the basketball card nerd podcast. That's right up my alley.
Yes, absolutely. I think we're both very much nerds in in this genre. Yes. So yeah, let's go ahead and start at the beginning and talk about how you got started in the hobby and why it led you to being known as the House of Jordans, essentially.
Okay, all right. Let's do that chunk of time. Short story, quick and sweet. I collected cards as a kid. Being from the Chicago area, had a lot of Michael Jordan and Bulls cards in particular, and that was a great era, the '90s, to collect basketball cards. And then I completely went away from collecting in high school. I went and I got really into music and music production, which was like my first career basically. But around the year 2016, as I was taking a year to study and prepare for the entrance, the LSAT, the entrance exam to law school, I just kind of picked up collecting cards again and got obsessed with it, and it became a way for me to procrastinate and avoid studying for the LSAT. It was a lot of fun, and I just got further and further into it and started up an Instagram account back in 2016 and like made some friends and met other Jordan collectors, got into Facebook groups, was buying and selling stuff, learning how eBay works. And then, a couple of years roll by and there really wasn't a lot of content hobby related. That's an understatement. There was very little to no hobby content. And then Cardboard Chronicles showed up, which was a basketball card oriented interview show on YouTube. And then 90s B-ball cards with Jake Roy showed up, another show that was basketball card oriented. And then that brings us to late 2018 when I started the House of Jordans podcast, and also Kyle from the Wax Museum podcast started his podcast around that time. And then there was kind of like these four sort of basketball card centric podcasts, going into 2019. So that's kind of how that unfolded.
Yeah. So what kind of got you sort of the idea, just in terms of, was it just your passion for 90s cards and Jordan's cards? You just decided, I just want to sit down and just talk about these and talk about what makes them so interesting, and yeah, just what was it that kind of went into your decision to really start doing that on a regular basis?
Yeah, well, I've always had a penchant for listening to myself talk. So that was a factor. And having a background in music production, I already had microphones and studio equipment that was not really being put to much use. And so, because bear in mind, I'm in law school now when we're starting this podcast. So there's not a lot of time to do other stuff, but we found a way to kind of record one episode a month. And it was just the thing that was so motivating to do the podcast was it just felt like there was an opportunity to talk about something really exciting that I hoped people would feel excited about too, which was just the process of discovering or rediscovering collecting sports cards, and in particular Michael Jordan cards, and in more specifically 90s inserts and parallels, and just kind of telling the stories of getting those cards and also talking about how this community was growing. It was even growing from when I showed up in 2016. It was already like growing, like almost on like a month over month basis. I remember just being like shocked. In the summer of 2016, I like saved up $150 and bought a competitive advantage insert. It's from 1997-98 Skybox Premium, and it's a really cool die cut, and I always just really thought it looked awesome. I bought like a BGS 9 for $150, and then I remember, kind of getting bored of it, or just kind of wanting to like throw it up on eBay and see what it might sell for. And I remember it selling for like maybe $300 to $350 like 6 months later. And I was just like, that's crazy. I can't believe that this thing became twice as expensive over a 6 month period. But that was really typical of like the growth in the number of collectors returning to Michael Jordan collecting. And the price was just like a symptom of that. It was just, the price was a symptom of the fact that there was 10, 20 more people looking to like buy a card like that or buy that card than there was just 6 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
And there used to be these polls run on one of the Michael Jordan Facebook groups where it would just ask, they would do this poll every once in a while and just ask like, when did you return to collecting? And, they would say like 2010, vote if it was 2010, vote if it was 2011, vote if it was 2012, all the way up to 2016. And every successive year had a larger vote tally of people indicating that they'd come back. And they kept doing those polls, and it just kept growing year after year. And so by the time it got to like late 2018, 2019, the Michael Jordan collector community on Facebook had probably tripled or quadrupled. And like those Facebook groups went from maybe having like 500 to 1,000 people to, 2, 3, 4,000 people. And it was exciting. There was an energy to it. And, creating content, especially like podcast content, is a cool way to like build on that energy and build on that community and get people talking and give people something to gather around and discuss and share. So, and being a student, even though law school is busy, I had the time and the mental engine was firing. So I had that, going for me back then. So, whereas other people, were working and had careers and families and stuff. So I think that was really a big impetus behind it, was all those things.
Yeah, and it was a really interesting time too to sort of keep track of the market, especially for '90s cars, because a lot of people talk about the COVID boom and the Last Dance spike that it gave to Jordan cards, but really, if you were looking at Jordan stuff from that time period you were talking about, like 2015, 16, 17, and on, when you can see some really gradual trends towards Jordan prices, as I think you said, more and more people that were collectors of the '90s and just passionate collectors of Jordan and really wanting to go back and find his truly rare stuff from that time period when they were trying to collect and trying to find stuff that you couldn't find probably back in the day because there was no eBay or easy way to get your hands on the really cool Jordan inserts or rare stuff. But yeah, I mean, I feel like there have been multiple sort of spikes or booms of Jordan cards going way back prior to 2020, and I think it certainly was an interesting time to kind of to look at what was happening and to sort of realize more and more people are just getting back into these things, and in particular getting back into these Jordan cards especially.
Yeah, it was certainly happening well before COVID, and I think it's ultimately a matter of timing. So I'm currently 36, and I think I was on I was a pretty decent age to come back to the hobby, because like I was, maybe towards the later end of people who grew up watching Michael Jordan. Like when he won his final championship in 1998, I was about 12, I guess, 11, maybe about to turn 12. So like, I'm like, that's about it. Maybe that's about as young as it gets to have real nostalgia for the 90s Bulls. And, coming from a Chicago Bulls household, that was a big factor too. But I loved basketball as a kid. My favorite player actually was Hakeem Olajuwon. I think partially because like as I was becoming able to understand the game a little bit when I was like 6, 7, 8, that's when Jordan was retired and Hakeem was dominating the league for those 2 seasons. So, I think like I've always been on a non-traditional path. Like I went into the music business, then I went back to school, then I went to law school. It's like I was always a little delayed, but I think there was a lot of people who like around my age, back in 2016, I was around 30. I think, somewhere between the ages of 30 and 40, there was something organically happening independent of any, widespread catalyst. It's not like anything just like triggered these people. It's just more like as we got to somewhere between 30 and 40, we all just sort of naturally rediscovered our cards and our collecting passion somehow. I think a big factor in it is like as you become an adult, as your responsibilities increase, as life becomes more complex, maybe you have kids or maybe you have a career situation, you have a wife or a husband or you have a family, and things just get complicated. And I think there's a desire to want to have an escape that's just something very simple and childish in the best ways, something that is a stress reliever and that's, that takes us back to childhood, to put it really bluntly, just something that brings us back to a time in our lives when we didn't have these complications and we didn't have so much stress and pressure, but just life was simpler, more enjoyable. And I think cards really do transport some of us back to that mindset. And I think that's a big part of the pull of collecting, in particular 90s cards, but just collecting cards in general, is that it connects us back to like a time in our lives that, we don't want to like go back to being 10, but it's nice to have an escape that makes you feel like a kid every once in a while. And so I just think that was something really natural that was happening at around that age, 30 to 40, people rediscovering sort of childhood passions, and like some subset, maybe a few thousand, maybe a few tens of thousands of people who collected cards in the 90s ended up stumbling our way back, between like 2012 up to 2020. And then you get to The Last Dance, and that was a total game changer, totally different type of event.
Right. Yeah. And like I keep in my mind, I keep thinking like when I grew up in the 90s, I wasn't so much a Jordan fan, but I was a lover of basketball and a lover of the hobby and collecting cards. And the Jordan cards were obviously always the sort of forefront of cards that they would market to you through Beckett magazine or if if you went to your local card shop, it would always be the same sort of Jordan cards, from '88 on or whatever, displayed free for people to look at. And so whenever you think of cards from that era, I still think Jordan still holds a prominent place in people's minds and hearts. Any of the big sets, Scoring Kings or Jambalaya or the Metal Universe, whatever you want to think of in terms of 90s cards, you have to think of the Jordan card first and foremost, just because that's the way it was in that era. And like I said, if you turn the page in Beckett magazine, all their top 10 cards were all pretty much Jordan cards or whatever. All the ones that they did price guides on, the picture that they usually showed was the Jordan example from that set. So I think that's where a lot of that comes from as well.
100%. The thing that's so like, there was a lot of like this natural return to the hobby that like wasn't really spurred on by any one event. But you're right, like it's the thing that like planted the seeds for this to be possible was the way that Beckett magazine, the way that just kind of we processed and received information. Dr. Beckett has talked about how the basketball Beckett monthly price guide alone had a circulation of 1 million copies a month during the 90s. I mean, it was a predictable, as sure as it gets, birthday present for me every year was somebody was going to give me that subscription to that Beckett basketball. And so there was this very sort of natural, organic return to the hobby. But The Last Dance happening also 2 months or 2 or 3 months into stay-at-home orders and the pandemic was a totally different. That was like supercharging what took 10 years of growth to build these Facebook groups up to have 2, 3, 4, 5,000 collectors who sort of slowly come back, stumble back into cards, and then they slowly get into it more and more. And then The Last Dance happens. It's having millions of viewers, and everybody's already stuck at home and looking for outlets and digging through old boxes of things and finding cards, and all of that happening at the same time. And it just compressed another 10 years worth of collectors returning, and it compressed it into a month. it just and it even went above and beyond, because it ended up recruiting back people who ultimately weren't going to stay, but just kind of, it was like a flash in the pan, moment of excitement. So that's such a sharp and interesting contrast, is the 10 years before The Last Dance, where you could almost measure these Facebook groups growing by a few hundred at first, and then by the time it's 2019, maybe they're adding 1,000 or 2,000, and then The Last Dance happens, and now these groups today have 15, 20,000 people in them, maybe even more in some cases. It's astonishing. It's just really amazing what happened.
Yeah, it wasn't just a boom in the card market and card prices. It was also a boom in people wanting to intake content about sports cards. And so what was that like for you, since you were doing it since 2018? What was it like once the Last Dance occurred and the COVID boom happened with everything? Yeah, how's that changed everything for you?
Man, it was I had bad timing, because right when the pandemic, right when the bounty of plentiful new collectors started to set in the summer of 2020, that's really when I ran out of time and I couldn't really do the House of Jordans anymore. So I still have people message me to this day who say, hey, I just got into Michael Jordan card collecting. I'm going back and I'm starting from episode 1 and I'm listening to all the Jordan stuff. And I'm like, that's awesome. I'm glad that there's some degree of evergreen. There's some evergreen property to the podcast, because it's Michael Jordan cards. They're from the 90s. There's not, but what happened was, when the stay-at-home order started, this was during my final semester of law school. Every class that I was taking went to pass-fail. It became clear that the bar exam was going to be put off for some period of time, simply because there wasn't a way to administer it in person. It also became clear that perhaps there's going to be an economic contraction. Spoiler, there wasn't, but it seemed like there might be a prolonged one. And then my job might not be ready for me for a period of time. And so all these are factors. It's I have all this free time. Then also I'm maybe I'm not gonna be able to start at my firm right away. So that was the perfect timing right there in March of 2020 to build CardLadder and dive in, because we'd been talking about it for months, but that was the time when, and also the same thing for, the web developer and co-founder Josh Johnson, who built the entire code base and technological edifice of CardLadder. He also suddenly was working from home, and it became a process where hey, we can build this thing in a few months and load it up with as much data as we can, and then just do this soft launch on June 23rd, 6/23, and 2020, and just like so, like that marked the end of the House of Jordans podcast, because they're just once that happened, there was no time to do anything else except work on that. So that was the end of the House of Jordans podcast. I mean, we probably would have. It would have been interesting to keep on making that podcast through the boom that really happened in the late summer of 2020.
Yeah, I mean, you guys did collaborate on the crossover for a little while, correct? And
Oh yeah.
yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean that's very true. It's just that's a different style of content, because it's basically we don't have to come up with ideas or anything. Like I collect around maybe 50 to 100 questions from people who will send them in, and then we just go live on Friday nights for a few hours once a week and just kind of read the questions and just banter around them, basically.
Yeah. But yeah, obviously, yeah, with CardLadder coming up during that time period and taking precedence, which really, I mean, yeah, I mean, you could say, I suppose, the way that CardLadder came about still was your relationship with Josh, pretty much, correct, and how you guys kind of came up around the same time period of being content creators and just talking about your love for basketball cards and things in the hobby, correct?
Exactly. Yep. And just being of a similar age and having nostalgia for similar eras, and gravitating to similar content sources. Like,
Yeah.
I think we initially met on Blowout forums. So being from like an era where like I remember in the 2000s message boards were everything, and so like he and I kind of, because of our age and stuff, kind of naturally gravitated back to a message board to try and find fellow collectors. And yeah, so that was obviously extremely important. And then just becoming fast friends, and just kind of talking cards every day, and just eventually one thing leads to another. It's like, well, I'm really into data and like tracking the market, and Josh is really into that too. And like Josh has this really unique skill set where he's super knowledgeable about cards, and he has web development expertise, and he's been professional in that field for a while. And it was just like, oh, maybe there's something here.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously there's a need for it. You guys created, I think, a pretty important product for the hobby. And I mean, what has that been like? How has things been going for you up to this point with CardLadder, and what do you see going into the future with the company moving forward?
Oh man, well, it's amazing to be able to work on CardLadder. And when I consider my alternatives, like during my time in law school, I summered at a big firm in LA, in downtown Los Angeles during my second summer. And then during my third year, I took a full course load and I worked at that firm for about 12 hours a day every Friday. And so I got a real taste of what it's going to be like to be a first, second, third, fourth year associate at this firm, or at any big firm. And it basically just included being huddled over a computer in an office for as long as you humanly can be before your eyes melt. And so I just doing legal research, which is interesting. It's not a boring topic to me. I did like it, but the comparison was like, I can be hunched over in front of a computer looking up case law and trying to find needles in a haystack and trying to do that stuff. Or I could be hunched over a computer but working on sports cards and building out a database of vetted sales that the hobby probably needs. And so it was the combination of like this work is little more exciting to me. I'm a little more passionate about it. And there was a sense of it was a vocational thing to it, or a sense of a calling, of just like, this matters, and this is cool, and it's fun, and it matters. It matters that somebody do this and do it very rigorously, and take and not rush into it, and not try to bang out some company and just sell it and be done with it, but instead like really put some blood, sweat, and tears and heart and soul into this and see it through. And so even when CardLadder was acquired by Collectors,
Mm-hmm.
which was almost a year and a half ago now, nothing changed in terms of our commitment and fidelity to building this database of prices and to building this piece of software that lets people access that information in a whole variety of ways. Nothing changed. The only thing that changed was that we were able to get access to more resources and more collaborators as a result of being with Collectors. But that's what's so neat and special and such a privilege about being able to work on CardLadder in particular, is that I've always really felt passionate about it, and really felt like it on some small level it makes a difference. It means something.
Yeah, I think so. So yeah, any exciting things on the horizon that you can speak on right now regarding CardLadder?
There always are, but I will get in trouble if I if I preview them too much. But
All right, I don't want you to get in trouble, but
I mean, some of some of the cool stuff that we've done recently is, we added the ability to use image recognition to do searches. So, we have a database of over 50 million sales that goes back to 2002.
mm-hmm.
And now, right now you can access them by typing, and using Boolean searches to like really try and home in on what you're looking for. But you can also now just take a screenshot of a picture of a card somewhere from on your phone or on your computer and throw that into the image search, and the image search will match up sales to that image, which is a very powerful tool. Or you can take a picture. You can just take your phone out, take a picture of the card, and then boom, within a second or two, you'll get search results of, in descending order of of similarity, and it's frighteningly accurate. So like that's a new feature that we've added within the last few months. That's pretty cool. But we're always striving to do stuff like that, striving to meet needs basically of what collectors want to see.
Yeah, those type of tools are so helpful nowadays, especially if you're like at a show and you're just trying to collect information as fast as possible with things that you're just seeing out on display at people's tables. Yeah, having tools like that literally in your hands that you can look up in real time, it really has been a game changer for this hobby these past couple of years. And I think another one of those reasons why more and more people have gotten interested in it is because of the tools and technology at your disposal now to look up and research information in a real fast manner.
I agree. But you know what? It's a bit of a double-edged. Well, that's not the right metaphor. There's a good and a bad to it. The good is that it certainly makes things more accessible, makes the experience more efficient. It makes people have quicker access to more information that helps them make more informed decisions, which is amazing. And then it also makes the collecting experience more fun. If you're managing your collection using a software tool, it's usually pretty neat. I find myself like browsing the digital version of my collection all the time on my phone. So like makes collecting more fun too and more engaging. But the bad side of it is that it almost risks destroying a little bit of the adventure. and a little bit of the challenges that made sports card collecting rewarding even just a few years ago. There's almost this risk of like, and I don't think we're there with sports cards, but there's this risk of if you take away too much of the friction, and if you make things too automated or too seamless or too easy, then some of the challenge is gone. If I could just like imagine my dream card in my head, and then I can just go buy it, and then I have it, and then the challenge is the hunt for the card. There's something to be said for that too.
I agree, and there's something to be said about being a little too tied into comps and information, and yeah, it can kind of go. It can kind of be aggravating when you're buying or selling in this hobby, and honestly too, for me personally, is I also have gravitated a little bit more towards things like vintage sign cards that have there's a lot of different factors into figuring out, you know, market value, rarity, things of the nature when you go back into vintage and go back into vintage autograph stuff in particular. That has been really exciting for me personally, and that sort of ability to do my own research and to figure out the actual values of some of these things depending on condition and when they were actually signed and who signed them and things of that nature. It does make that sort of category really interesting to me, and what I've kind of levitate towards here in these past couple of years.
I think that's such a great insight because I can relate to it myself. I almost find myself now looking for like I find the technological revolution that's happened in the hobby over the last 2, 3, 4 years, which ironically, like CardLadder has been a small factor in. I almost find it pushing me towards wanting to find and collect cards that are untrackable. Like that's one of the things about one of ones that I've really begun to gravitate to lately, which is similar to what you're describing with the vintage autograph market. It's like almost all of those are one of ones. Like let's say maybe it's like a Jim Brown. I'm just completely making this up. I don't have expertise in this area, but I'm going to try and like make up an example to illustrate a point. Let's say it's like a Jim Brown autograph rookie card. The card condition is PSA 2.5, and the autograph is a graded 6. How are you going to comp that?
Right.
You're not going to be able to very easily. You're going to have to get really creative. You're going to have to you have to try and bring in analogy or analogs and similar players with similar grades, or same card but different grades and different autographs. And like, is there an inscription? Is there not? All these things that sort of make the piece a one of one in its own way. And I've gravitated to modern one of ones of some of the modern players I collect for a very similar reason. It's untrackable. There won't ever be a graph for this. There won't ever be a profile on CardLadder for this card. There just won't be. And that makes it appealing to me. That adds a little mystery, a little intrigue. Those cards are often very difficult to hunt down and find if you don't own it. And that's not to take away from the cards that are trackable. Most people, I think, especially those who lean towards investment style thinking, need the tracking component. They need to know how often it's transacting. They need to know, what's the going market value at a given time. Even if it's not perfect, but they need an approximation. But the collector in me really resonates with what you just said.
Yeah, absolutely. So, speaking of the collector in you, what are now some of your favorite things that you have, or things that you're most proud of, and things that you're currently kind of in the middle of still collecting at this point in time?
Well, so much. The heart and soul of my collection will always be Michael Jordan 90s cards. Like that's the foundation upon which everything else in my collection is able to comfortably rest. So I'm always, keeping an eye on those. It just got really difficult because Michael Jordan 90s cards, especially like last year in 2022 got so expensive that they were beyond cost prohibitive. Calling it cost prohibitive is, an understatement. They were just exorbitantly expensive, and I'm out. I am priced out many times over. So that got annoying, but also cool because like, hey, I happened to buy some of those cards 4, 5, 6 years ago that now are exorbitantly valuable. So I'm not like, as much as it stinks that I can't go add more cards like that. At the same time, I'm lucky enough to have a few. So cool. But that definitely drove me to look into collecting other athletes and players that I can feel a connection to and feel really excited about, but that are priced, at 1% of what the Michael Jordan equivalent is. And that kind of led me to like collecting Christian McCaffrey in football, who, I had a really a strong connection to because him being on my team won me a fantasy football championship. And then I also I love looking at analytics. I love numbers. And he was always one of the guys who was just off the charts from his first season onward. So like I started a collection of him, and similarly, for similar reasons, I started collecting Nikola Jokic in the NBA, and now he's maybe the player I'm most excited about collecting these days, or close to it, because there's no hype around him. And the media is very reluctant about him. And so that makes it a pretty clear path to like collect his cards and not be concerned that like his market's going to lose 60 to 70% of its value because like the hype's going to go away and everybody's going to move on to the next hot topic. He never was a hot topic. So that's an appealing thing about collecting him. But as he adds to a really impressive resume, it's for me, it's like the best of all worlds, collecting a guy like that. And then, collecting Luka is something that, like, I stumbled into collecting Luka because, my partner, Christina, she wanted to get into opening modern products. And this just happened to be during 2018-19 season.
Mm-hmm.
And we just was like, okay, well, Prism seems to be the coolest product that's in our price range, because back then hobby boxes were $200 at release. And so we just started opening Prism, and like we pulled a Luka orange out of 49 out of one of the boxes. And this was I think it was the same day that he made that absurd 3-pointer from the corner at the buzzer. Just like there's like less than a second on the clock, and so this highlight was all over TV, and we were just like, whoa, like, okay, this guy's like the hot rookie from this class, and like we just pulled a really cool card of his, and this is fun, and all of a sudden we have that orange, and then we eventually like pull a silver Prism, and then find myself looking up his cards on eBay, and like before you know it, like by the time it's like February of 2019, I'm basically tuning in to watch all of his games on League Pass, and then I'm like, whoa, this guy's just gets better and better. And so like I built a connection to him through just like that, through cards. Cards built this connection to him as an athlete. And then because we work remotely, now we're working on CardLadder. We moved to Dallas, and we're, the American Airlines Center is right across the street. Like we go to all the Mavericks games now. And so
advantageous, for that to happen. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of where my collecting interests are. And then I just have my interests continue to broaden. So like last year I went to see the Nuggets play the Warriors in the first round of the playoffs, and like that led to me taking a heightened interest in Stephen Curry and picking up a Prism Black fast break from Prism only did fast break 1 year, 2017. They only did Prism Black fast breaks 1 year, 2017. And went and picked up the Curry. So like now I've got a little Stephen Curry card, and got LeBron's 2018 Prism Gold, and like I was trying to build out all the LeBron Prism Golds from 2018, but like that's expensive. But got a Lamar Jackson field level gold rookie. Took an interest in Frank Ntilikina as because like during the Summer Olympics, France beat Slovenia, so like I was like, oh, this Frank guy, he's Frankie Smokes, he's cool. And then he went to the Mavericks, so it was like, right. Okay, this is a lot of fun. So like I don't know, but Le'Veon Bell, I've started Le'Veon Bell PC because he was a big fantasy player for me way back when. So my collecting, man, it just gets more and more absurd.
That's so good. All right, but if you could, in your off the top of your head, if you can name at least a few of your favorites that you have that still have,
Sure.
What would they be?
All right, I'll give you my 3 favorite cards.
Okay.
In the collection. Number 1 is a PSA 5 copy of the Michael Jordan PMG Red.
Okay.
Which I bought raw in person from somebody. It was a BGS 8, and the owner cracked it out because BGS had labeled it back. BGS had put the label in backwards.
Oh.
And the owner cracked it out, and he was planning to resubmit it to BGS. And I just said, no, I would just love to buy this. And we came to a deal. And then I brought it to PSA because we lived in Southern California and I didn't want to mail it, and then got PSA 5, which was a gut punch. I remember that grade popping back in the day and just being like, oh my God, this is horrible. But now it doesn't seem so bad anymore. But
yeah, so probably doesn't matter at this point. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's okay. So that's like my favorite Jordan card in the collection. Then my favorite Luka is a BGS 9.5 2018 Prism Gold, which I bought that in the summer of 2019. I was just sitting in the law office as a summer extern, not really much to do, browsing eBay, saw somebody had that card up, and I just basically negotiated a deal with them at the office that day, and that was that. So that's my second favorite, or my favorite Luka.
I was going to say, I don't suppose you will tell us what you got it for back in 2019.
I will. It was $8,500.
Oh my God.
Yeah, which was the equivalent of about 2 weeks of work at the law firm that summer, because they really want you to come back and work for them. So even though you don't do much, they pay you as if you're already a salaried associate. So they just throw money at you, and I'm just sitting there, and I'm like, man, this money's burning a hole in my pocket. Let me just buy this Luka.
Yeah, seemed like good choice.
It worked out in retrospect. Not all Luka purchases have worked out. Let me tell you, we bought a Luka in March of last year that has not done well. But okay, so and then my third favorite is so last spring as well. The reason why I even went to Denver to watch that game was because there was a huge, maybe the best Jokic collector in the world lives in Denver, and he's a younger guy. And he had the Jokic Prism Black rookie 1 of 1, which he had for years. And, I was just becoming obsessed with Jokic, and I just, really wanted to get that card. And so that's my favorite Jokic. And that's a BGS 9.5 as well, is his rookie Prism Black 1 of 1. Wow. Those are the top 3.
It's a good top 3, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's probably the top choice of anyone who would collect any of those 3 players, getting a red PMG of Jordan, a Prism Gold rookie of Luka, and a Prism Black of Jokic. I mean, you really can't do any better if you're a hardcore collector for any of those guys.
Indeed. I definitely can't complain.
Oh, well, probably a good time to kind of wrap it up, but I just want to make sure, is there anything else you want to make sure to mention, whether it's about anything you're doing with CardLadder or anything coming up, any shows you're going to be definitely going to, or anything else that you want to make sure to mention while here?
Yeah, sure. How about I'll do a quick plug for the Mint Collective.
Hmm.
which is coming up at the end of March. Are you going to be there by chance?
No, probably won't be able to. I'm going to
Fair.
try my hardest to go to national, and that's where my focus is at the moment to see if that can happen.
Well, I'll be there as well. So like the two
Yep.
big, I live in Dallas, so it's easy to go to the Dallas Card Show at least 1 or 2 days and
Hmm.
that show comes up every other month. So I'll be at all those, and I'm going to the Mint Collective at the end of March in Vegas, and then I'll of course be at the Chicago National,
Yep.
and it'll be great to meet you there and meet lots of great collectors and content creators there.
Yeah.
And
Are you on are you on a panel on those? Do you know?
yeah, people
Yeah.
will be forced to listen to me talk at the Mint. I don't know about the National though. I don't know. I don't think. I think I'll just be wandering around the National. So the National should be fun though. I very rarely buy cards at shows. Do you do a lot of transacting and wheeling and dealing at shows?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, and a lot of it usually are actually trades at trade nights or just trade shows, whatever. So I don't do a ton of like just buy at every single table or anything like that. But I think where you're getting at is a lot of it is just I'm just going around just talking to people, and I'm sure
Yes.
that's the same for you, right? Yeah.
That's what I like, And I don't like to do too much of it, but that's why I like one nice show every few months,
Hmm.
see people, talk to people, but not get like worn out by it. It's good. It's just like then go retreat for a few months and then come back out and see everybody again. That's why I really like most about shows.
Yep. Absolutely. Once again, thank you so much for taking your time to do this today. Once again, it's Chris, House of Jordans. Instagram is Chris_HOJ for House of Jordans. Yeah, definitely give him a follow if you haven't already. Appreciate it, man. You've done so much for this hobby, and I appreciate everything you've done for it.
My pleasure. I'm really happy to see your channel on the rise as well.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
My type of content for sure.